Good evening to you, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this evening's live stream. As is customary, we have a special guest later on that I will introduce Matthew in a little while. Matthew's joining us from Malta. You might have seen our adverts or our little biographies of him. So it's a very, very, very interesting character. I'm looking forward to hearing his story and hearing his view on a few other issues as well. Now, before we move on to that, as usual, I'll just make a few comments about a few things in the news. There's quite a few, actually, that have come up, things I just thought I'd like to say something about. I'll be quite brief with them. First one, refugees have been in the news a lot, refugees from the Ukraine especially. And there's been people saying, Britain should take as many refugees as want to come here, etc. That's been the general tone. The good thing to do is to take more and more refugees, which I think, obviously, refugees need to be accommodated as well as possible. But there are some quite important principles, I think, about the best way to deal with refugees. And here are some of them. One of the most important is I think it's often the best for refugees and the best for the country that they've come from if they stay relatively close to their nation of origin, to their home. So they can go there, maintain links with people in the country, and then they're ready to move back afterwards. They don't have the huge cultural dislocation. And they maybe don't feel so much like they're starting a new life somewhere else, but just that they are refugees. They're waiting to go back and get the country back to normal. If you imagine you're a country that's experienced a war and a lot of your people just leave the country and then they don't come back again, that can be quite a problem, especially if those people are really key trained people that you need. That can be quite difficult. So in some cases, it can be very beneficial for people to be accommodated quite nearby. If that's not possible, obviously, people need looking after one way or another. Now, Poland in particular has taken huge numbers of people. They're generally staying in family homes, which again, that's brilliant, isn't it? I mean, the last thing you want is like these refugee camps full of tents with terrible conditions. So living in homes is fantastic. And the other thing I think the Polish government's got right, and other governments as well, is they're saying that these refugees can work. Quite often in refugee camps, the rule is you're not allowed to work in that country. You've just got to be living off aid and handouts, basically. People can be there for months, if not years. I mean, this is not good. So being able to work is very important as well. So then Poland in particular seems to be doing like everything right in terms of accommodating, looking after, supporting these refugees from the Ukraine. Right, something else I've just been quite interested in is seeing the BBC reporting of the war in Ukraine. And some of the reporting, you hardly hear anything about there being a war. All the reporting is about refugees, political issues, etc., humanitarian problems. Now, of course, that's absolutely valid. They're valid things to report on, absolutely. But it seems that they focus on those so much, you hardly get any news of like, what's happening in the war. I mean, there's fighting going on. What is happening? It's that the BBC's decided that's not really what it's interested in. It will prefer to present the sort of human interest, humanitarian side, which I don't think is a very complete picture. I think they're presenting a very skewed picture of a war. And in terms of people's understanding of what's going on, I think they're failing their audience by failing to inform them, as I say, of the actual goings on in the conflict. I've often said to myself with the BBC, I turn Radio 4 on in the car every now and again. And I normally measure how many seconds it is until there's something about sexism, racism, LGBT issues, or climate change. And it's normally about 6 seconds or so. So the other day I was in the car, I heard the news as I've just described it. Then it went on to an arts program about a writer. Okay, I'll listen to a writer. So they've got to say, of course, needless to say, this writer started off with a feminist point. My parents didn't want a girl, they wanted a boy. Then she talked about mental health issues again. That's one of the flavors of the decade, isn't it? People talking about mental health problems. Okay, mental health problems, very real, but just such a focus on it. And then, of course, this person had been a refugee as well. Again, huge focus on refugees. It's like the BBC have just got these set points, set lines they want to talk about, and they mold all their content around it. Now, with regard to refugees, there's two sides to the refugee issue. One side is, I think, what all of us would share is the desire for people to be looked after, and to being able to return to their country of origin. That's just sort of common human decency. There's another side to it as well. And people who believe basically there should be no borders, there should be unlimited immigration into every country, they see refugees in a slightly different light. They maybe see refugees as a sort of wedge issue. That's the issue they can build on in order to make their case that there shouldn't be borders at all. So refugees are quite politicized in a sense, which I think is why the BBC likes to talk about them so much. Right, another thought about the Russia-Ukraine situation. Lots of people putting Ukrainian flags on their social media profiles and lighting up buildings or whatever. But I thought, I suppose, people in the West, if we do want to support the cause there, or alternatively, to just promote the well-being of our own nation, I suggest maybe at this point in time, it might be an idea to try and use a bit less fuel, a bit less energy, a bit less gas. I think that is going to be beneficial for Europe and for Britain in the coming months. Now, you might have heard me talk about this before as well. I guess it's still related to Russia and Ukraine. There's something in international politics that's referred to as the Russian doll problem. It's just coincidental. It's called the Russian doll problem. But a Russian doll where you take off one layer and inside there's another one. You take the top of that, there's another. You keep taking the top off and you just find a smaller version of it inside. And in international politics, the Russian doll problem refers to the situation where you have a national boundary, and some people say, no, we need to move that national boundary because people in this part, they would rather be of a different nationality. They'd rather be independent, or they'd rather be part of the country next door. Okay. So what might happen then is eventually they might say, okay, we'll move the boundary to here. Problem solved. Everyone's happy. But what happens then is you create some new problems, because within that area that you've made independent, or you've joined onto another country or whatever, there's some people in that who think, well, that's not what I wanted. We didn't want that. We wanted to stay part of the other one. And then you could say, okay, well, we'll draw a line around those then. And we'll say that bit of the land can stay part of the other country. But what happens then? That bit you've drawn a line around, there's some people in that say, no, that's not what we wanted. We wanted to go to the new country. And you see the idea of the Russian doll, so that you keep doing it forever. And unless you're going to draw your border, like round houses and round individual streets or whatever, you're always going to have this problem, the Russian doll problem. And that's what makes it such a dangerous thing to be moving national boundaries. And a lot of international conflict, obviously, that's where they stem from. And the Russian doll problem is very significant. Right, something else, we'll get to Matthew very soon. Something else that I came across today, I found intriguing, was that in Canada, until about, 5 or 10 years ago, they had a system where political parties got paid by the government according to how many votes they got. So if the Scottish Family Party had been in that system, then after the last election, we might have got, £50,000 of government funding. Now, I know what you're going to say. You're going to say he would say that, wouldn't he? But I actually think that could be a positive thing for politics, because the political system is very much skewed against small parties. It's deliberately set up to make it difficult for small parties. But at least if you get a substantial number of votes, if that resulted in a substantial amount of money coming your way, that enables small parties to sustain themselves and to be represented on the political stage. So I thought there's something in that policy. Now, in Canada, of course, it was abolished by the biggest party and by the Conservative Party, the one that had the most wealthy donors. So it's in their political interest to do away with this system. But I think that's a system that's well worth considering in Scotland. It wouldn't cost very much. There weren't huge sums of money, but I think it's fair. I think it would be democratically beneficial. International Women's Day today. That's an interesting day. Its origins go back to communism. I mean, that's just a fact. It sort of celebrates some actions by some female strikers during the Russian Revolution. And it's basically in tension with Mother's Day, I always feel. Social conservatives are very happy with the idea of Mother's Day. That's a particular role that should be celebrated and honoured. And just that's something people want to do, don't they? That they want to have a special day for their mother, buy presents or whatever. That's what people want. But people of a very socially liberal disposition, they don't like that, because being a mother is like the lowest of the low of what women can do. Women need liberating from that. So you don't want to celebrate motherhood. Dear me, that's the last thing they want to do. Motherhood is like the dead end job that wrecks the career of many women as far as they're concerned. So they want something different to celebrate. So they have International Women's Day, which really, if you look at what it involves, it's basically International Feminism Day, because it tends to focus on women, being CEOs, fighter pilots, lawyers, whatever. It's very much career focused. So I think it is intention with Mother's Day. So in the Scottish Parliament, they had an International Women's Day debate today. I haven't brought myself to watch it yet. I've watched it in other years. It's probably just the same. I'll maybe watch it and make a video. But they certainly wouldn't have a debate for Mother's Day. No way. That would be totally off the agenda. They wouldn't dream of honouring Mother's Day in any way at all at the Scottish Parliament. Now, in schools around Scotland today, the feminist indoctrination will have been in overdrive, absolute overdrive. There'll have been classes being taught about the so-called gender pay gap, about all sorts of things. Just standard feminist theory on anything and everything will have been taught to school pupils as fact on an industrial scale. And that's one of the many things that as a Scottish Family Party we want to challenge. Right, one more thing to mention. This is maybe about the last call for this. We sent out our packs of nomination papers to our council election candidates yesterday. We're hoping to have 70 or even 80 candidates, which is amazing, absolutely fantastic. But it's not too late for you to become an election candidate in a local ward if you'd like to do that. Your name on the ballot paper gives people the chance to vote for what they believe in. It helps people to hear of the Scottish Family Party, and it boosts our total vote as well. So if you wanted to be a candidate, you don't need to have anyone contacting you. Your contact details wouldn't be publicized in any way, shape, or form, and you wouldn't be expected necessarily to campaign in any way. And if you wanted to, then that'd be great. It would just be a matter of filling the forms in, taking them to the council, and that's it. So if you'd be interested in doing that, we're sort of at the last sort of stage where you could do that. But if that is something you would like to do, we would really appreciate it. I think if we can get up to 80, that's a fantastic number of candidates for us to have. So if you're interested in that, just drop an email to chairman@scottishfamily.org, chairman@scottishfamily.org, and Michael Willis will show you the ropes, and we'll get some paperwork to you, and we would appreciate your support in that way. Right, welcome to you all in the questions. Good to see some familiar names and some new names there as well. We'll try and bring some questions in during the evening, but it's time to bring in Matthew. Welcome, Matthew.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone.
Right, Matthew is joining us from Malta. You are our first ever guest on the live stream from Malta.
Wow.
We're very much looking forward to your story. Just tell us a bit about Malta, for that. I've never been. How many people there? How big is it?
So Malta, approximately 500,000 people on the island, and yeah, it's wonderful here. But Malta has been changing along the years, definitely more so in the last few years. Unfortunately, we do have a liberal governance, and we do need to apply a lot of resistance, just like you're mentioning. In the United Kingdom and in Scotland. So, yeah.
So how does your English get to be so good?
Oh, I actually lived in London for 2.5 years.
Okay.
Yes, so that's actually where I came into faith and became a Christian. I owe it to the UK. So Malta's bilingual as well. So we most Maltese people speak decent English.
Okay.
The last people to conquer Malta were the British, actually. We gained our independence, I should know this, 1970s, I believe, late 1970s. So yes, so English is very much part of the whole system in Malta, educational system as well. some private schools you would only speak English and no Maltese allowed. So
Okay.
English has a huge influence in Malta.
Okay. Fascinating. Well, we're very much looking forward to hearing your story, and we can talk about a few issues spinning off from that. So, where would you like to start? We will sit back and listen to your account of your
Thank
adventures.
Yes, so yeah, I shared my testimony several times in Malta. So I left homosexuality, and that's only part of my Christian testimony. But I understand that it's a controversial statement to say that you left homosexuality, because we live in a world where one is celebrated if they leave heterosexuality to go into homosexuality, but if it's the opposite way, it becomes a no-no. And so we're just seeking to break that taboo, because there are many individuals who are not satisfied or happy living a homosexual lifestyle. And they have every right to determine their sexual identity and to find help to obtain to achieve their goals, should I say. So when I was a child, actually a baby, I found out later on in life I did something feminine with, well, that appeared feminine to my mom as a baby, and she was afraid that I was going to grow up to be a homosexual. And now that sounds weird and strange, but my mother confessed that to me in my late 20s, and that was a surprise to me. Um, I believe that there's no one thing that leads to homosexuality. It's normally a combination of things. I don't believe that homosexuality, that one is born homosexual at all. I believe environmental factors contribute to same-sex behavior, and that's actually backed up by science. There's a very good article on Science magazine that talks about that a bit more in depth. Up to 92% of factors that contribute to same-sex behavior are environmental. So that just shows you the importance of this narrative that we're discussing today. I grew up, I guess I was a kind, sensitive, um, young boy, and I guess I found some stumbling blocks in my interactions with other males. I was quite intuitive, musical, and I must say, I found it pretty hard to find other boys my age who were into the same things. And I struggled to connect with some boys. I have an older brother as well, and he happened to be very different from me as a boy. So we didn't really connect very well. We had different personalities. um, my father was into sports as well, so he connected very well with my older brother. I I guess I wanted somebody to understand my language, at least a man to understand my language. But I failed to receive that as a young boy. So I guess I found it easier to relate to the girls and to my mother. I felt safe with girls. I felt safer probably with my mother, who I guess became quite protective of me as well. I'm sure she was picking up some of my insecurities as a boy as well. Um, and so I remember stumbling upon some material online aged 11 that was um, very damaging to me. It was just pornographic material. And that led me down a very lustful path, unfortunately, in my life. And I just became addicted to lustful imagery and that sort of thing. And I was still trying to understand who I am, and I tried to be in a relationship with girls really in my early teenage years. But I found myself having some serious insecurities. And on several occasions, I was verbally abused, and people were calling me gay because at times they would observe me flirting, not really flirting, but actually noticing other uh, teenage boys and kind of having a crush on other boys. And it was all very shameful for me. I kept it secret. I tried to hide it to the best of my ability. I didn't want anybody to find out about my personal struggles. It was just very personal to me. Um, and yeah, so I guess some people around me were still picking that up about me. I guess I had some feminine tendencies as well. I must add that I I actually followed some uh, cartoons that were very popular with the girls, not with the boys. So I'm talking about Sailor Moon. It's as embarrassing as it gets for me. But I used to enjoy this idea of these female sailor scouts that came to the world to save the world from evil. And I could relate to that narrative. I said, yeah, I'm a good person and I don't want evil. I hate evil and I like what these girls are about, you know? And so as a boy, as a young boy, you're looking for role models. And ideally, if you're a boy, you need male role models in your life to understand your masculinity, to understand your manhood, and to be shaped to be the man that God called you to be, you know? And I guess I didn't really have a good male role model in my life. Dad was, of course, you know, busy with work, you know, very active, a very active civil servant. And so, you know, I had some issues there. So I go into this relationship with a girl that goes on for 3 months, and we click very well. We enjoy each other's company, and it's so wonderful. But yet, I feel so insecure, and I don't really feel um, some level of attraction, some level of physical attraction that looks promising to me. So I end that relationship and I'm trying to figure out who I am and what's going to happen to me. What does my future look like as a 16-year-old, you know? And online, I start to discover this whole thing about bisexuality and homosexuality, and people start to declare their sexual orientation on social media platforms. I'm talking, you know, when I was at the age of 16 approximately. And so I thought to myself, well, am I what society calls gay then? What is this? So I go into a few experimental relationships with other boys, and my flesh seems to like what it's experiencing. And I was thinking, well, maybe I'm this gay thing, you know? And I'm looking for love, you know, in every direction, and I'm looking for a serious relationship. I didn't want to be the promiscuous type of homosexual, to be honest. Um, and so the reality is that I was looking for affirmation, approval. I was looking for love, etc. But I'm still hiding it from my family, and I'm really, really struggling because I don't want this thing. I don't feel like I chose it. I don't feel like I have a way out. Um, I feel like I've only got one option, which is to accept that gay is who I am and that there is no other way whatsoever, you know? So to cut the long story short, I get this opportunity to move to London. So I moved to London, and I entered into probably my most serious relationship with another man in London. Um, and this woman comes up to me, a new acquaintance in London, and she shares the gospel with me, shares her faith with me, and I'm intrigued because I see kindness in her. She was very loving, and something was different about her. So I'm invited to go to this church, and I walk in and I see these Christians lifting up their hands, and worshiping. And I thought, what a beautiful environment. These people have tasted something that I haven't really tasted yet in my life. And I was just trying to understand. And I felt very welcome by these people. I felt very embraced. And I guess I really needed that. Um, and it was genuine and it was spiritual. So I said, you know what, I like this Jesus thing and I want more. And I'm invited to go to the main service of this church. And I experienced the presence and the power of God in this church during worship, just during every aspect of um, the service. And the leadership prays for me and lays hands on me. And nobody ever did that to me in my life. Nobody. And I felt special. I felt valued. So I bought my Bible, but I never heard homosexuality addressed from the pulpit. And I bought the Bible and I started reading it, and I came across some Bible verses about homosexuality in the New Testament. And I thought, okay, homosexuality, sinful. What is this about? Because for me, it felt natural to desire the same sex. So I thought, do I fit into this category of homosexuals as described in the Bible? I was thinking, I was trying to make loopholes. I was thinking maybe this is referring to men who never really struggled with homosexuality, but they're just sleeping around, whatever, because they're just wanting to have this lustful time or whatever. I was confused, but I started praying because I had the fear of God. And I said, Lord, I want to do the right thing in your eyes. I want to be at peace with you, because when I'm at peace with you, I feel joy. I feel like I'm at the best state in my life. And so I started studying these verses and comparing them to the original New Testament language. And I discovered that homosexuality in the Bible is not necessarily a feeling, but a practice. And this understanding hit me that God loves me as a person abundantly, richly, lavishly, but he hates whatever is not reflecting his nature, whatever it opposes his design. And so when I understood that, I felt set free. I felt heaviness leave my body. I said, wow, so I'm not a homosexual. God does not see me as a homosexual. I'm a man, period. And I was set free to see myself through God's eyes as nothing less than a normal man. And that brought me great freedom, I must say. And so instantly I refused this gay label, that just because I struggle with same-sex attraction, it does not mean that I need to be wearing this gay badge on my chest. And I started growing in this new identity in my faith in Christ. And I decided to repent from sin. And I had the courage and the boldness to face my partner at the time. And I said, you know what, like, I'm on this journey with Jesus, and my faith has become more important to me than following every feeling in my body, and my values are more important to me. And I know what I'm feeling, I know what I'm experiencing, and this relationship does not glorify my creator and redeemer, and it does need to stop. So I made that decision, and I felt comforted because I was not on my own. I had the power and the grace of God with me. And it was this new journey of discovering the new person that God made me to be. And yeah, so that's how it started, really, Richard. I don't want to go on, and maybe you might have some questions for me. There are other things that I could say, but this is in a nutshell.
No, that's fantastic to hear. We'd very much like to hear your story continuing. I've just got a question here you could just respond to. So someone here is suggesting that in some way you're saying that his gay friends don't exist.
I see.
What
Well,
would you say to that?
they certainly exist. They are made in the image of God. However, we need to define gay here, because gay, the Bible doesn't talk about gay. The Bible talks about homosexuality and homosexuals. So the homosexual in the Bible is not a man who struggles with same-sex desires. A homosexual in the Bible is a man who practices sex with the same gender, the same sex, which is a different concept. So unfortunately, the way the world defines homosexuality and the way it is described in the Bible creates conflict. And so it's very important for us to define what we're talking about. So for the world, gay is instantly an identity. So if you feel it, then you are it. But as a Bible-believing Christian, I don't believe same-sex attraction is essential to personhood, and so we don't turn it into an identity. We believe that is actually a very harmful thing to do to other people. Feelings change, feelings fluctuate. Sometimes from one day to the next. If we base our identity on our feelings, we are in trouble. And that is why society is in trouble, because we must build more objectively than that. Feelings are subjective, but the word of God is objective. It speaks identity into us, and the kind of identity that does not change from one day to the other. It gives us stability. God's way of giving us identity gives us stability, something which feelings fail to do every single day.
Yeah.
So
I would say at this point, Matthew's obviously relaying his experiences of becoming a Christian and ongoing experiences as a Christian, which I, as a Christian, completely relate to, and that's on my wavelength. If you're watching, you're thinking, well, that's not where I'm coming from. I'm not a Christian. I don't really get that. But that's the reason Matthew's here, sharing his story, is because this is related very closely to a very important political issue in Scotland, which is the conversion therapy ban, which effectively says that Matthew's story can't possibly be true. No one can go on this journey, or if they do go on this journey, no one should be allowed to help them on this journey, sharing their values. So that's the thing that's very definitely his family party policy. We oppose this conversion therapy ban. So it's just fascinating to hear Matthew's story. I wish we could have all the MSPs, members of the Scottish Parliament, listening to it. What would they say? Some of these very aggressive campaigners, the MSPs as well, saying that basically Matthew's story is impossible. He doesn't know his own mind. He's just been deceived. He's been brainwashed. So we actually need to protect Matthew from his own thoughts and the journey that he's on. What would you say to someone who said that? You've just been brainwashed. You don't really know what you want. It's just internalized homophobia coming out and steering you on this route. What would you say to that?
Richard, I think it's time to talk about heterophobia.
Mm-hmm.
We could accuse each other all day long about who's brainwashed and who's not. They could call me homophobic. I could call them heterophobic. But what are we going to achieve? At the end of the day, everybody has a right to determine their sexual identity and feelings as well. And nobody should come up to me and tell me who I am, right? Because I have a right to determine who I am for myself. So me leaving homosexuality and embracing heterosexuality in my life is me being true to myself, me being authentic to my identity in Christ and who I want to be in life. And so it should be celebrated. My authenticity should be celebrated, just like other people's
Yeah.
authenticity. So
Yeah.
actually, I oppose conversion therapy bans because when I wish, Richard, that when I was younger, somebody told me that there was another point of view that doesn't lie to you and tell you that you're born that way and you cannot change, against scientific evidence coming from peer-reviewed research. And I love what the IFTCC have just done. They have released an international declaration that basically sets the record straight and says it's basically a call for governments, local authorities, and other organizations and institutions to recognize that the right to self-determination is an established principle of international law, and it must include the right to shape and develop one's own sexual identity, feelings, and associated behaviors, and to receive support to do so,
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I mean, do you want to carry on with this story? How do people respond? How have people responded when they've heard this story? Because I mean, to a lot of people, this is just complete heresy. And we've got someone else who is a sort of ex-gay in the Scottish Family Party, and he says he's had appalling abuse as a result of it. There's been like hostile articles in the gay press repeatedly trying to attack him on any grounds that they can find. What would your experience been when you shared your story?
I shared my story several times on national TV in Malta, but probably the most controversial time was when I shared it in a pre-audition interview on X Factor. I basically shared that I left homosexuality, that I now embrace the biblical view of marriage between one man and one woman in Christ, and that I stand for biblical marriage. And apparently, it was controversial. And I mean, X Factor had to moderate the comments because there was so much hatred. My audition was pulled down, not only my interview, but I was not even allowed to express my talent, not just my views, but my talent. It was just a complete shutdown of my identity, a complete dismissal of my life, my entire life. So that was actually very harsh. And it was done because of external pressure, because the public has been, I believe, brainwashed by mainstream media to think that this is crazy, that this is silly and foolish, and so, it was a problem, and it was actually discussed in Parliament as well by the Minister of Equality back then, who's now got a top EU job, Helena Dalli. And many politicians and social media influencers ended up talking about it as well. So at first it was a bit shocking because people felt unintroduced to this concept. But then they started seeing more people come forward saying, I left lesbianism, I left transgenderism. It just simply wasn't for me. I was sexually abused when I was younger, and that's what led to my homosexuality. I don't want it anymore. And it wasn't just me, it was more coming forward. And so people started to understand, hang on, maybe we should just give them the benefit of the doubt here. And most people, Richard, think as long as you're not harming anyone, we will accept you. We won't find anything wrong with what you're like, they will give you the right to be happy in your life as long as you're not harming others. But of course, then it becomes a problem when we share our joy with other people. We share and celebrate our testimonies, and people claim that we're harming others. How's that? How's that? If somebody is depressed because they don't want those homosexual feelings, their mental health is in a terrible state because of these feelings. They just simply don't want them in their lives. and they're depressed about it. They're anxious, and somebody offers them hope. And as they receive this hope, they feel much better in their lives on a personal level. How is that harming? How is that harming them? If somebody is married, if a man is married to a woman, he was sexually abused when he was younger. He brought some baggage into his marriage. He's got children, and he wants to work on his issues to save his marriage, to save his family, and he's looking for support to affirm his heterosexual feelings, to save his marriage, to work on his marriage that he has been building for years. And he's looking for support. Who is the state to ban support and help for this man? Who is the state? Why is the state interfering? Why is the state not giving this man an opportunity to be happy, fulfilled in life, and to achieve dreams and goals?
Yeah, it's exactly the way you describe. The people, for example, a prominent Scottish politician left his wife and children a few years ago now. He said he was inspired to do it by the same-sex marriage debate in the Scottish Parliament. So that inspired him to abandon his family, which he then did. He subsequently had to resign because he was sort of sending sexual messages to schoolboys. That's the sort. But at the time when he abandoned his wife and children, again, that's well done. That's a really brave thing to do. And also, the poor families who've been abandoned, it's as though the media expectation, their duty, is to support them and say, "Oh well, he's done the right thing, and we're right behind him." Because obviously they're heartbroken. Their lives turned upside down, but they're not allowed to say it. That's another view that you're not allowed to hear at all. Just when you had your incidents there, when there was the big flare up and the attacks on social media, etc., was there anyone who sort of stood with you publicly, came to your defense in Malta?
I love that question. So I was approached by a politician whose name is Ivan Grek-Mintoff, and he's well known to be conservative in Malta. And he was giving me some advice and showing me that I'm not alone. I really appreciated that. And I was also approached by Christian Concern and Core Issues Trust, and I really appreciated that, especially because it came from the UK, and I always had a special bond with the UK, particularly because I lived there for 2.5 years, So I felt greatly loved by my brothers and sisters in the UK, and so that really gave me a good boost that I needed. And of course, I must say, my church in Malta, and my pastor, the deacons in the church, and the brothers and sisters in the church have been just the most welcoming and embracing of my lifestyle choice, and I feel like in the church I belong. I have a place where I'm not judged, but I'm completely celebrated to the point of even being in leadership and being an ordained deacon now as well. So I feel like church is definitely a very supportive environment for ex-LGBT people.
Yeah. In my limited experience of being in sort of under attack in sort of public ways, I find people's supportive messages and personal support, that's extremely valuable. But also what I find I valued hugely as well is people who would publicly make a statement that's supportive. I find that was really that was much harder to come by, and I was extremely valuable. But it sounds like you had people doing both,
right,
alongside you. Yeah,
that's right.
I would say, to some degree, as I had, far more behind the scenes than publicly. But that's good. But just a sort of hypothetical question: had your family have been very liberally minded, if you knew when you were growing up, you knew that they would be very positive, whatever your sexuality you declared yourself to have, what difference might that have made to you?
I think it would have certainly probably normalized homosexuality in my head, but I think I would still have felt that something is off about it because nature does not lie. I know that there was a man and a woman, that I owe my existence to the combination of man and woman. So I know it deep inside my heart that that's natural order. So no matter how much society pushes this agenda, I believe that in our heart of hearts, actually, we know the truth because we are all born from that one combination of male and female coming together. So the thing is, I'm very thankful that I don't come from a family where this would have been treated as completely normal. I'm sure I would have found acceptance, and respect still from my family, from my parents. But I think I'm definitely happy that in society we still understand that there is a truth somewhere, and it's worth fighting for, and it's worth holding on to.
Yeah, yeah. Well, what would you say to people who would say, well, you're one of the rare success stories where you've been down this road and it's turned out very positively for you, whereas most people who try and follow the same path, that goes very badly for them and they end up in a worse state than they were, and it's very detrimental to their life outcomes. Well, what would you say to that?
Right. Well, I interviewed around 36 men and women who left LGBT, and for all of them, LGBT didn't work. It didn't bring peace to them. It didn't bring joy to them. They're much happier now than the former days of homosexuality and transgender or transgenderism that they are in. So yeah, I think people have different experiences, different outcomes. I now know what I want in my life, and I'd rather surround myself with success stories because I know that if I choose to, I can just bring all the failure stories before me and bring them all together and say, you know what, because of these failure stories, I can't get there. I can't do this. But I choose to do the opposite. I want to have the hope of family and having my own children. And I speak to men and women who left LGBT, are now married, have been married for many years, have children, and give me some fantastic advice. And they are so happy and fulfilled. They're an inspiration to many people. And so I think, we can just stop trying to apply pressure on each other and saying, oh, because this person didn't manage, then you won't manage. Well, you don't know. I choose to be surrounded by good role models in my life because role models will either make you or break you.
Yeah, but my feeling with the conversion therapy bans is it's presented as protecting people from harm or torture, as they laughably try and refer to it as. So they say it's trying to protect people from this dangerous, harmful practice. But I think what it really is, it's like a blasphemy law. It's a group of people saying, we can't bear the thought that there are people out there who think we don't want to be lesbian, gay, transgender, whatever. That's not what we want. We want something else. Therefore, implying that for them it's inferior or some way, it's less preferable. And that's the thing they can't bear, that thought exists within society. Because I think that the move with LGBT issues, it's gone from wanting tolerance to the stage now where it's wanting like perpetual affirmation from all directions. So anyone who doesn't say, that's great, I completely agree with what you're doing and endorse it entirely. Anyone who fails to do that, that they can't bear it. So the problem with conversion therapy is not the therapy that's the problem, I think. It's the fact that it embodies an understanding that a lesbian, gay, or transgender identity lifestyle might be regarded as undesirable by some people. I think that's really what's driving it. Would you agree with that? Do you think that's the heart of it?
Yeah, so essentially, conversion therapy is a pejorative imposed term, so we don't really like to use it. I mean, we only refer to it because it's now commonly understood as referring to something. But in reality, I think there are a lot of misconceptions. So, of course, they try to link it with some kind of electroshock therapy that was practiced at some point, probably also in the UK. But the thing is, where is the evidence of torture? We've been asking this for years. Show us the evidence of torture. We can provide peer-reviewed scientific evidence that change allowing therapy shows tremendous benefits in people's lives for those who choose to receive counseling. That might not have been my story because I had a more of a spiritual experience, and then it's been this renewing of the mind through the Word of God, etc., etc. Although I greatly benefited from scientific literature as well, I must say, and researchers in the field. But if you have a look on IFTCC and actually read this declaration, there's a full review document which has some incredible references there that provides evidence that talk therapy that allows for change actually greatly benefits some people. And if it does, then why shut it down? Why should the state speak on behalf of every single individual? I think we should stand for autonomy and self-determination and let the individuals decide, and not get into all of this sexual politics.
Yeah, absolutely. The declaration that Matthew just referred to, I put it in the comments on Facebook and YouTube there.
Thank you.
If you're interested. Thirdly, you put this, you were saying about things that happened in the past. Then that's really important. It would be like someone now saying, in the olden days, they used to treat high blood pressure with leeches, but leeches didn't do any good. They made people worse. Therefore, we should ban treating high blood pressure forevermore. I mean, the argument's so bad. I mean, it's just ridiculous when you even state the form of the argument. And the same with the torture thing. But I think the torture thing, it just needs laughing at. I mean, it's so ridiculous. It needs laughing at. I mean, in the Scottish Parliament, they had someone speaking to the MSPs saying, oh, yeah, it's a form of torture and you can't consent to torture. So even if someone thinks they're consenting to this therapy, they actually aren't because you can't consent to torture. And one of the MSPs said, wow, that's really profound. Thanks very much. It's amazing. It's a parallel universe. Just to say about the conversion therapy ban in Scotland that's coming through, it's looking like it's going to cover any sort of conversation. So it could be a conversation between a parent and a child saying, no, I actually think, you're a boy. You might be feeling, you're a girl at the moment, but you're actually a boy. We don't think it's a good idea that you deciding that you think you're a girl. Let's talk about that. Then it would cover that. That would be classed as a form of conversion therapy. So it's not covering what you'd normally think of as therapy. It's covering any sort of interpersonal interaction in any context with any age.
Right. And it takes away parental rights as well, bans attack parental rights. And one of my mottos is change your mind, not your body. If we're going to talk about harm and torture, well, changing the way you think is certainly not harmful, but what about changing your body and having irreversible consequences? I'm sorry, who's harming who? And I think this is what we need to be talking about, because our point of view does not tell people to cut body parts and go through traumatic events in their lives, sometimes doubly so, because that's what detransitioners go through. You know, they go through transition regret. They find out actually they've made a mistake, and now what? You know, what do you do? How can you reverse that? And so it's just heartbreaking that some people have to go through double trauma in their lives, and yet here we are celebrating trans everything and pushing this onto our children. I'm sorry, but no.
Yeah.
No.
So that trauma, that irreversible mutilation, is healthcare. Whereas saying to people, "Are you sure this is what you want to do? I don't think this is a good idea." Then that's torture,
Right.
and the mutilation is healthcare. I mean,
Right.
how topsy. I mean, if you brought someone from 50 years ago, they wouldn't believe it, would they? They'd think this was some comedy show or some wild fiction. But that's the
But we're the
situation.
brainwashed ones, right, Richard?
The what, sir?
But we're the brainwashed ones.
Yes, yeah. One more question that came up when you were speaking, this came to mind. You said about the sort of nature and nurture origins of same-sex attraction. Do you think there's an element of sort of neither as well, an element of free choice? So when someone starts to experience these things, the way they respond to them, does that have a significant effect on their development as well, do you think?
Well, actually, that's a good question, because sometimes, I mean, we might not choose our feelings, but we have a choice around those feelings. And we are saying that there is a choice, you know, that we don't have to be victims of unwanted sexual feelings, that we can make choices around them and take authority over our bodies and actually conquer our bodies, you know, and not be subject to our feelings. And that doesn't just apply to same-sex desires. It applies to anger. It applies to you know, a man who's attracted to many women, a married man who's attracted to many women, you know. So
Yeah.
This is a common human exercise. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. This is my last question as well. You talked about the influence of some online material that you came across at some crucial stages of your life. I mean, surely that must be a very big factor in a lot of young people's gender and sexuality development, in that there's so much unhelpful, is a mild way of putting it, unhelpful material available freely on the internet. I mean, do you think that's playing a significant role in the sexuality and gender development of young people?
Certainly, unfortunately, younger children are being exposed to pornography, and it's just blurring the lines, and people now get sex education from pornographic material, and their image of man and woman is so distorted, and they don't know right from wrong anymore, as long as they are being taught by pornographic material. So it's devastating. It certainly has a destructive role to play, because, you know, there's all sorts of material nowadays, and I just think that we need to think twice and actually really regulate in a way that builds strong individuals and protects their futures, especially talking about children here.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to say, I think what you presented this evening is unanswerable. It's unanswerable. People haven't got counter arguments to show why what you say doesn't really make sense. So even if we took you to the Scottish Parliament, put you in front of all the MSPs, and you could share your story, I think it wouldn't make any difference, because it's not convincing. It's completely convincing. But I think this is not about logic. I just thought this tonight, listening to you. It's actually more about power. It's about who they fear. They're not worried about you. They don't fear you. You're someone in Malta who you know says something different. But they do fear the media. They fear being called homophobic. They fear the LGBT lobby, and so they're going to stick with their view. on this. And I think the reasoning, your story, but it said unanswerable. I think they're not interested. It's other interests with that. Just to say one more thing before we finish. Obviously, from a political point of view, a conversion therapy ban in Scotland is coming. You can write your MSPs all you like, but it is coming. And the reason it's coming is because the SNP had it in their manifesto. The Labour Party had it in their manifesto at the last election. The Lib Dems had it in their manifesto at the last election. The Green Party had it in their manifesto at the last election. And get this one, this is the one you need to make sure everyone knows. The Conservative Party had it in their manifesto at the last election to introduce a conversion therapy ban. So anyone who voted for any of those parties, if you voted for a conversion therapy ban. Now, viewers of this channel, you obviously voted for the Scottish Family Party. So you voted against a conversion therapy ban. But please, the message to distribute far and wide is, if you don't want these things to happen, you need to stop voting for them. That's ultimately the core of our message. But Matthew, that has been brilliant. I've been seeing the comments. People have really enjoyed listening to your story. I've been touched by it. And it's been great. They've been so open in sharing that. We must have you back on the live stream again in a few months, because
what a pleasure. Thank you, Richard. Fantastic. I feel very enriched. Thank you.
And if ever you're in Scotland, do come and see us. We'd be delighted. Delighted to welcome you. Right. So thanks very much. Thanks for watching, everyone. And those of you who've watched later on as well. Do share this around. Share it. Put it on social media. Send it to your MSP. Try and get a response out of them. They'll probably ignore it. They probably won't say anything. But you'll see. It just might be interesting. Right. Good night, everyone. And see you next week.